everyone to the Australia Microsoft 365 Adoption User Group for June. We are 7.5 years in, so still tracking and going along. I know it's been a while, Darrell, tracking for a bit now. And I'd like to start by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the lands on which we're all meeting from today, and to pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging, and I extend that respect to any Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples here today. And I'm also conscious of the Indigenous for New Zealand, considering we have Darrell with us today.
Kia ora.
So, yes. So I'd like us all to be welcoming, open and understanding of different people's viewpoints, because we all come at this with some interesting focus points when it comes to Microsoft technologies, let alone life in general. So I always ask that we just be a little respectful. Okay. Now, let's keep moving forward. My name is Kirsty. If you haven't been before, I see we've got a few new faces on the list, so it's always nice to see someone new coming in. I am an adoption consultant, employee experience, trainer, change, you name it, with On Point Solutions. I always start with a bit about what have I been up to. So, of course, as always, hanging out with my grandson. Decided to get him a Minecraft hoodie, so now he's trying to be a, I don't know, what's the mean one with the black face? I think I'd remember after doing the cake recently. He's trying to be one of those. Took
Creeper.
him to the something like that. Took him to the medieval fair, which was an interesting time. When rather excited, my son has moved back to Sydney after being away for 3 years doing his degree. He's just started with New South Wales Ambulance. Hopefully, you don't get to say hello, so it was exciting to have him come back. It's like all things. Who wants an ambulance officer turning up? I also went to Vivid. And it was wonderful to go and see Vivid and get out and about. Had Tommy Emmanuel, went and saw him at the Opera House, was pretty cool. We're going with my brother to see that. Currently in the throes of making my brother and sister-in-law's 50th birthday cake. My mum arrives this evening, so it's all a bit on for young and old. So next month you'll get to see the 50th birthday cake. I'll throw that one up there. Anyway, that's a bit about me, what I've been doing. And I am going to, I know that I've, flipped it where I'm bringing the speaker in first and then I'll go next, because the 365 updates have just got, there's just been so much more. It's getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And, more content coming through that I thought if we go over and people need to leave, you can always kind of watch the updates. I think the speaker's always a little bit more important. So I appreciate them, spending the time coming in. I know, Darrell, you're more important. No cake in person. No, not unless everyone wants to come back and actually do the in-person sessions. Hey, you come back in person, I might make a cake for you. So maybe we'll put it up for a vote. So our guest speaker today is the illustrious Darrell Webster. So you may have seen him online, especially if you sit across the ANZ space. Certainly does some phenomenal work. I will let him introduce a bit to himself. You do need to talk yourself up, Darrell, because you do some wonderful stuff across the modern workplace and as Darrell as a service. So if you ever look him online, the presentation that he will be going through today is available inside the link. I can't, I think this is such a big presentation and so much content in it, it won't allow me to present in Teams. So I can't have the links quite live, but I will copy and paste that and put it in to chat for you. So I will hand over to Darrell, who is going to speak with us today about Microsoft Loop. It was April 22, I think it was, that you came in last time, Darrell, to talk
wow.
Loop. Yeah, when it first started. Lots happened since then.
Oh, tons, and then not, right? Let's be honest. Let's be honest. Come on now. The Buzz video certainly set the scene, but it did actually also make us wonder, like, is this thing actually going to come?
When and what does it look like? And
exactly.
Yeah.
So Microsoft Loop. What's new? What can you do? How do you do? Well, thank you for the Microsoft 365 Adoption User Group for having me back. Adoption is definitely near and dear to my heart. I do care very much about user experience and people using all our hard work, all the bits and pieces that get turned on to the best practice, listening to people, configuring stuff. But if they're not using it, what's the point? Exactly. So who am I? I am Darrell as a Service Webster. You can now get Darrell as a Service. My big move. I went to independent consulting. a few bits and pieces, get in touch. I don't usually put a slide like this up there. I sort of say hello and carry on, right? So good to meet you all. What is today all about? I'm sure, no, I can't even say that. I'm sure you've all heard about Loop. No, I can't even say that. I still get into conversations with people I haven't heard
same.
and don't know, and it's a reality. It means that the marketing does go in its sort of waves and turns and doesn't quite make it, but that's all right. We're going to have a look at what Microsoft Loop is very briefly, and I'll point you to other stuff to sort of find out a bit more about it. But the big questions are like, which tool when? Oh man, another tool. God, I don't want to use this. Why would I use that? Well, we'll figure that out. We'll have a look at, what we can use and sort of tell a bit of a story. I think I want to leave something with us as adoption experts and people who are interested in adoption, but how we might tell a story around when to use it, what to use it, and where it all fits in. And, part of that is actually looking at a case study, or at least looking at it in action and seeing that it's not just this big empty page that we just throw stuff on, but we can use it for practical purposes. What is coming to Microsoft Loop? We don't have a roadmap, but we can look at some things about what's coming and what we know so far. I will demo, but I want to go through some concepts and things as well. What is Microsoft Loop? Well, this is one side of Microsoft Loop. This is the Microsoft Loop app. That's one of the big new things that's come out in the last few months. It is actually something we've been waiting for, because if you didn't notice, Microsoft usually releases apps and they do private preview and public preview, and they say, hey, look at this thing. Download this, sign up and get this thing. But with Loop, it was actually kind of backwards, and it left a lot of people confused. First of all, it was a feature within Teams chat. You're like, okay, what's this little thing down the bottom here that we can add to our chats? I don't know. Click on it, try it out. Okay, I'm done. Away you go. Didn't really get it, right? And then it started to appear in other things as well over time. And this was called the Loop component. Well, the next piece that came along was actually more recently. It felt like it took years to get to there, and it was the Loop app, which really started to bring it together. So we'll have a bit of a look at that and what that looks like. And you might remember it from the Buzz videos in terms of what it is and what it does, but we'll take a look. I wanted to start off by talking about and comparing Loop components, workspaces, and the app. I am not going to play a video. I'm not going to pull out this is a component, this is a workspace, this is a whatever. I'll start off by talking about this left-hand side here, Loop components. That's what I just talked about, this thing that we could add to a Teams chat. We could start off by clicking on the Loop logo. It would allow us to add and start from maybe a list of bullet points or a checklist or numbered list, or even just a paragraph, and we could add something to our chat. We'd start that chat off, we'd send it to the people who are in the chat with us. It might be one person, it might be a few, might even be in a Teams meeting, and we could start to work together. And it felt initially a bit like a fancy notepad. We could type a few words, we could see cursors floating around the screen like we can usually with Word, Excel, and PowerPoint. And it was like a co-authoring tool. And the cool thing about it was that it was so easy to get to. It wasn't like you might have been in a conversation, Kirsty and I, we might be on a meeting and we think, okay, we're going to take some notes together. Okay, well, I'm a guest and you're tenant, so can you start up a OneNote? Okay, I'll start up a OneNote. I'll invite you to it. Oh, you're in this team. 5 minutes later, we actually get to the thing that we want to collaborate on, and then we get on with it. Now, today, okay, at the moment, we can't share loops and loop components with guests, but that's going to be coming. And at the moment, internally, it's even simpler than that. It's just start collaborating. So that's what components are, and we'll have a brief look at that too in action. Today, it's in Teams. It's in Outlook. Like Teams, okay, chat, Outlook. What? Why would I add a loop to an Outlook? So we'll explain a bit about that too. Appeared in Word Online. Why would I add something that's collaborative into Word Online when Word itself is collaborative? Don't get it. Well, we can talk a little about that too. And Whiteboard. So Whiteboard, the glorious, inking tool, the sticky notes, the various things, we can drop a component in there and start to work together. Now, I see a question there from Beck Galen about where loop components are stored. When we create a loop component, if I'm the person creating it, it gets stored in my OneDrive. It also depends on what app I'm using. If I create it in Teams, it goes into a folder called Teams chat files. Yeah. If I create it from Outlook, it goes into Outlook attachments. If I create it in Word, it's like, what? Okay, it's going all over the place, but it's in my OneDrive. And that, maybe doesn't feel like the right place to put it if we're all information architects, and we're sort of thinking, oh, well, if it's in OneDrive, it might disappear and someone might leave, and is that really the safest place to put it? But if you get on to the idea of what loop components are, it's all about where we start with ideas. And I'll have a look at the idea lifecycle shortly. Plenty more questions that I'm happy to answer as well. So we have the other half to this, which is the relatively new piece, is the Loop app and the Loop workspaces. So over here on the left, we might have these components that are sort of popping up everywhere, and they're part of our conversations. They're all stored in the OneDrives of the people who created them, so that get a little bit confusing. But then over on the right-hand side, we finally have this workspace where we can bring all these things together. We can link to them. We can even start from there. And it might even look and feel a bit like OneNote. So we'll have a closer look at that. But it's that place to go as a team when you've got the intention and you want to focus on the collaborative work and start there. So I like to think about this in terms of components being a place where we can collaborate in the place that we're currently in. I'm in a conversation, I'll use it there. When I have an idea with Kirsty, with Daniel, or someone else, I will start on that idea right where we are, capture all those thoughts, and then we'll build on it over time. Whereas the Loop workspace is where we're starting deliberately from our workspace where we're going to collaborate together, and we're going to start off and keep that all together in one place. Great. Lots of different ideas. Well, let's talk about that life cycle of an idea. Actually gives us a really good anchor point for what Loop is and how it plays a part in it. So what does an idea? Where does it start? We have an idea maybe when we're talking with other people in a chat, on a call, in a meeting, or maybe even we're talking with ourselves. Does happen, yes, especially with me when I'm running. When I'm in a conversation, then I'll have this idea and I want to sort of capture it and start to think it out and put those ideas down. So the idea is shared. Maybe I am with a couple of people and I talk about that idea with them, and we might even start to draft it. Grab a whiteboard pen, scribble something down on a piece of paper, even write it down in the chat notes, maybe. Going from there, we have that idea, we share it with more people. Maybe this actually gains some legs. It turns into a task, it turns into a project. What a great idea, let's build on that. And going further than that, that task begins to be worked on, deliverables are defined and started to be worked on and completed, and then we launch that idea, we make that a reality, whatever that idea is. So where does Loop fit into this? Starting at the top. Yeah, you like that? Okay. Add a component to a conversation at work, right? So I might be in that conversation and I need to capture that idea with someone, or even with myself. I could add that component to the place where I am working. In chat, in Outlook, maybe I'm in a Whiteboard, and lots of other places coming too, eventually. I can share that component. So now that I have put those ideas down in one place, then I might want to try and expand on that and loop other people in. So I will take that idea and I will copy that link and I will share it with other people. I can then maybe add that component to the workspace. So now we're thinking about, okay, if that loop component is sitting out there in a conversation, an idea, feels like a note, but I want to bring it in somewhere it's got a bit more substance and it's going to stick around and become and built on as part of an idea, then I bring it into the Loop app and the Loop workspace. And I can build out that idea on a Loop page, adding more components, adding more things that I can do with it. But eventually, Loop is just an ideas tool, maybe just a collaboration tool, or even a place to throw things together in terms of collecting knowledge. But I would really want to bring it into a richer, fuller tool that allows me to publish that proposal or come up with that presentation, or I'm taking it somewhere else to trying to make this a reality. So loop ideas don't necessarily live there and finish there, but they often go on to something that's richer and more capable. So which tool when then? And maybe like with a few of these questions, maybe I should bust out to the Loop app just to begin with, right? So before we get into the which tool when, this is the Loop app, and I'll get out of the big glorious looking project and we'll go into a brand new project, which is of course a fake name. We have the Loop app. It is a web app. And what I've done is I've installed it as a progressive web app, which makes it feel like it's an app all on its own. You see on my Mac here, it actually has its own logo. And that makes it mean that I can have it open. It feels like it's got more presence on my desktop and I can use it. But if you want to just go to loop.microsoft.com, if your admins have set it up in your environment and they've gone through a few steps to make it possible, then this is the Loop app. I've created a new workspace, and I might start off that I've got this blank and empty page. And that's what it looks like when we can come into a brand new Loop workspace, that it feels a bit empty and we're like, okay, now what? I don't get it. But did you have that same kind of feeling with OneNote when you first opened that up and you started looking at notebooks in general? So you start to get a pattern and some thoughts about how do I use the space and how do I collaborate with people? And we'll have a look at a good example of that a bit later on. So this new page, you could start off with some templates that give you an idea or give you some sort of starting points of maybe I'll write out a project brief about what we're going to work on together. Maybe it's just that we're getting together for a meeting and we're going to make a decision. So we might capture a few thoughts and things beforehand. We'll ask the big question. We'll mention a few people that are going to be in that meeting, give a bit of background context and a link to something that people need to read. And then we can sort of capture some of those ideas in a table and maybe vote on it as well as we go. And so that's a template. And so a template, you can start off this way. You can clear the contents and say, great, I get the idea. I'll clear the contents so I can use it for myself and fill it out and carry on from there. So that is a page. Now, I know I could be hopping around. I could be doing a big deep dive into what the Loop app is and go much further than that. But I'd rather carry on and also show you some working examples of how we used it. So let's get back into PowerPoint. Which tool when? We've started to see something of the Loop app, but big questions are like, well, okay, where does that leave me in terms of the other apps? I thought Teams was the place where it's going to bring me all together with all of my stuff. And yes, it still can, and it still does. And I've suggested too that we're not necessarily going to create all our documents in Loop and then try and print them out from there or try and make these, gorgeous, well-formatted looking things. No, we're still probably going to use Word, Excel, PowerPoint, etc. to get our work done. We're still going to use Teams for chat and conversations and meetings and calls. We're still going to use tools like To-Do and Planner and other places to manage our tasks and manage our resourcing. So that's not going to change. But what might help is that Loop might have a place alongside this. And I just want to sort of tap into a feeling that I have, and I know some of us sort of feel this way too when we use a tool that's supposed to be the be-all and end-all and it brings everything in all together. But really, we still have the same habits. We still go to files and we still create 30 different folders, and the next layer down, there's another 20 and another 30. We still have conversations that, things are attached in all sorts of different places, and you're always asking, when I was talking to someone this week and it was about this and it was this person, and you're always like, you still, while things are still all together in the same app and in the same tool, they're actually still scattered everywhere. And so the idea with Loop, as I see it and the way that we've been using it as a team, is that we try and use it as a place to curate and collect and bring things together. So alongside Teams, files will still be shared in Teams, conversations and meetings will still be had in Teams, but I might use a Loop page to then reference the documents that we might need to read and look at before a meeting. I might use it as a way to reference a statement of work or something like that, to be able to keep on top of those things and make it easier for people to find this content. Got him. Got him. It's like playing swat the mic. Yeah, like Loop actually has some pretty amazing qualities to cover some of the use cases that we see up here about task management, or even, we could actually start drafting and putting together a document and an outline or a presentation outline in Loop. And the point is that it's quick and it's simple. We start that process off, and then we might start to bring that content over into that fuller, richer tool. So that's one way to do it. We'll see some of these in action. Some of these scenarios, starting a project. I'm going to show you this shortly. This is a project we did for creating a, shared workspaces solution for a government department. And that was our first project that we ran within the Loop workspaces. We started off by defining what that project was, having a timeline, laying things out, and it became the place to go. A bit like how some of us have used OneNote in the past. And in some ways, if you're super advanced or people are really confident, maybe you're doing this with SharePoint pages in a SharePoint site and a team site. You're using pages to define things. Well, the Loop was a way of us being able to lay out that project. Everyone had access to it, and we could define what we needed to do and where, and put all those common resources together. So yeah, there's another example of it, designing a site template, and we were using it for discovery and capturing some of those ideas and thoughts. We used it for taking notes and meetings and keeping that all together as part of the project. So lots of different ways to use that. Oh, should be going back to the demo. So let's take a closer look at that project in particular. And oh, did you see that? There's actually some people in here at the moment. So they're not here for demonstration purposes. They're doing real work. So live code, everyone. Live work. Yeah. So we have a project here we're doing for a dairy company, Fonterra. They are right in the middle of rolling out a intranet. We've rolled out Engage to 9,000 frontline workers. And having fun. And we used Loop from the start to facilitate this project. So we started off with a page and a project brief to let people know, key dates and where things were. We had a whole section here on discovery. So we set up all our discovery sessions, and we used a page for each of those. So, here's the people that attended the meeting. In fact, you just saw it in the slide earlier before. What sort of notes did we capture and take in there, and mentioning people that the certain task might be assigned to follow up on things. You can see that we've structured it all in sort of pages and sub-pages, and that's a really nice way to keep everything together. As we got down to things like project management, so our project manager, she's live in there now, and she's probably just adding some notes from one of the meetings that we had. She actually uses a great big, there we go, there's Elizabeth, a huge table to sort of capture some of those key points that we've discussed. Further down here, where are we? Somewhere we had like a reference point here for statements of work, and there it is. Right. So statement of work is a bit like having the questions in front of you during an exam. You've got to always refer back to it. What's in scope? What are we supposed to be doing? And you want to have that in a nice, easy place for people to find. So yeah, we could pin that somewhere in a folder, somewhere in a team, somewhere in a channel, but we've made it nice and easy to find on a page. Costings, project plans that change, basic tasks that we might have thrown together that need to be ticked off. And then the 2 work streams. So intranet work stream, keep everything together there, meetings, actual work, designs, ideas, training videos. So I've working on a script here for a training video that we've put together for one of the things that we're showing that's replacing quick links. And so the ideas, they're there on the page, they're simple, they're easy, and we start to add to them. And while we're here, why is this different than OneNote? Why is it different than OneNote? Why is it different than Word? Why is it different than Notepad? You don't see a whole lot of menus, ribbon menus, and a whole lot of choice. What you do see is a blank page, your /. Oh, there's all the things that I want to use. These are called components. They're quick ways to start and capture ideas and use different, almost like small apps or tools on a blank page. So, I might have created a checklist. Great. Item 1, item 2, item 3. That's handy. What else? Forward slash, well, let's go task list. Looks pretty basic. Task 1 and task 2. And we'll assign that to me, because I am a sucker for hard work, and I'll click on a date that's going to be due tomorrow. That's totally realistic. I'll get task 1 done by then. And this looks pretty basic. And why don't you open up Planner, Darrell? Why don't you open up To Do and just start using, the channels and the buckets and the tasks, and just get into it. I didn't, because I needed to capture those tasks really quickly, figure out who it was that needed to do it, and there's a date. But guess what? Behind the scene, this is actually synchronized into Planner anyway. Slightly different way of Planner, but it is still in Planner and backed by that, and therefore you can access those tasks in To Do. So, Loop, very simple, low friction way of getting in and getting started and capturing all this stuff. But sometimes in this case, backed by the fuller, richer tool anyway. And we hope to see some big things there. Plenty more I could show you. Conscious of time. Let's get back to it. Demo. Guiding principles for adopting Loop successfully, creating a Loop co-creation culture. I like C's. Loop with a purpose. A bit like anything in adoption. You don't have a purpose, then what's the point? In fact, if we rolled out Engage to Fonterra and said, turned it on, where you go, have fun. Yeah, you'd probably have a number of different communities, but really where they had their success was because they had a really clear purpose of what the official communities were going to be used for, and leadership got behind it, communication improved, and it really took off. So same thing with Loop, have a purpose. And that's why when we wrapped it around a project and we started to build that Loop collaborative culture, it was mint. Something I'm working on, thinking about, don't work flat out, flatten work out. I talked about having work in all sorts of channels and conversations and multiple files and folders and apps. I think that Loop allows us to flatten that out by trying to bring it all together as curators, as collectors, and put it all on a page and try and make it easy for that one place to go to see all the stuff that we're doing with tasks, the references, the documents, the chat, all sorts of things can all be put on one page. So making it easier for team members to pick up from where you left off. And this was really important for our team because we've got someone in Poland, we've got people in Chicago, there's our client based in New Zealand, but also myself and a couple of our team members. So asynchronous work, being able to work in our own time, it was important, and being able to leave each other notes and give each other feedback. Keep those Loop pages simple. And okay, you look at our massive workplace or workspace, it doesn't look simple. We've all become familiar with the patterns of how we're working and what we're doing. It took a little while to build that collaborative patterns and culture. But point is to start off with a Loop. It is actually supposed to be delightfully simple, and start off, and don't think that it's a bad thing to set up a simple Loop in a simple workspace, because the simpler it is, the easier it is for people to engage in and start to use. Clicking over to the last bit about what's coming, because this is a quick tour through Loop and what's coming, what's new and what can you do. There is no official real roadmap for Loop as far as I can see. What we do have is a few things that I talked about in a conference presentation. We see stuff that appears in Message Center, and then it comes out eventually. We also see conversations happen on Twitter, and for those who might follow the @Microsoft Loop Twitter handle, and a few people that work on the product group, they often will be quite open and talk about some of the things that they want to do, and they're open to getting feedback as well. So a few things that I picked up: collaborative meeting notes. So this involves Teams as well as Loop, but being able to add notes to a meeting, and it's shared with everyone within your organization who attended that meeting. It is live, it is There's no syncing involved. It's not a question of whose notebook and where. It's just there. I click the button, I go. In fact, even beforehand, as I'm organizing that meeting, I can pop in the agenda and I can say, hey, add your other agenda items, and here's a link to the documents that we're supposed to be reading, and we can capture those tasks afterwards. A big request was around getting code blocks for being able to capture code and sharing code. So I know it's not a great big video, but / I want to use a code block. They drop in some code. I'm not a coder, but they've added some examples there. They turn that into a component, and they can share that into a Teams chat, into an Outlook conversation. They can even drop it in a whiteboard, and away they go. So that's pretty cool to see that live, and that's one of the strengths of Loop, is that it is very, very quick in terms of co-authoring. There's this other thing I don't have a picture for. Supposedly it's supposed to be here, right now. But if you are using Loop and maybe you've used it in Outlook, or maybe you see notifications come through when someone mentions you in a Loop component or a Loop page, then in Outlook Mobile, you're going to be able to see that live, and you'll be able to open up and see what's happening in that component, and you can just get started and contribute directly from Outlook Mobile. So that should be here now. These are references, for the message center message. Lots of whoopses, but let's finish off there. And I'm happy to answer questions in the chat as well. I can see a few people have definitely been active in terms of answering those questions as well. But thank you for having me on this whirlwind tour through what's new and what can you do. So feel free to reach out if you want to know more. And yeah, as I said, I'll be active in the chat trying to answer some of those questions.
Thanks,
Cheers.
Darrell. It's it's certainly an interesting space that's sort of throwing up a lot of questions at the moment of that what use when. It's like I get a lot of, well, why don't I just be doing it all in OneNote? Isn't that supposed to be our collaborative kind of note taking, and we're all in there together and we can do tables, and coming into it is task management, and shouldn't we be there? Or it's like, well, today trying to help people to understand the use case or the why really seems to be a bit of a challenge for a lot of people to get their heads around it. And I think with that workspace and using Teams and compared to a Loop workspace and playing with the mobile, there has been a couple of questions. I'm happy to read them out to you, or if you want to do it in chat, more than happy for you to continue on. Although there are some good ones there, I think that others might have some benefit for too. I know, Beck actually works in Gov, and, for those guys, and I'll come back up to her chat. Well, now it's jumped around, of course. A lot of people do have OneDrive turned on. Not everyone actually has it on, in terms that they're trying to transd and personal. So, for that scenario, you're not really going to be able to use Loop at this point until it moves over into some of the SharePoint components that are, coming down the line.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, and it's certainly with features appearing in Loop, it is slower to come to Gov and to some of those military level kind of tenants. But yeah, the components, they rely on OneDrive, and because it's yours, you started the Loop, so it's easier for you to share. But if you don't have that sort of turned on and available. The other thing that you have to keep in mind too is some organizations have a more stringent approach to sharing from their OneDrives, and they have certain defaults that are set so that it's only specific people first. So that tends to catch some people out too. Some of the places where you use a Loop component, you add it to an Outlook email, for example, and it's first of all going to pick up on your sharing defaults for your organization. And if your organization is, well, we're not going to allow editing by default, we're going to make it a view link, and we're going to make it a specific person link, then you have to be mindful of that and check those permissions before you share it. There's also, like with the Loop app at the moment, it is not compliant. It does still have a ways to go to make the purview and e-discovery side of things, or data loss prevention a fuller story. They've got to close that out. It is working in Loop components, but not the Loop app. And there's an interesting story really around the Loop app and how maybe it's diving into the weeds, but it is used in a different kind of storage based on SharePoint, but it is called Syntax Repository Services. So it's not even called SharePoint. It is going to be a new thing that developers can use to dump their stuff in there. But basically, developers have to develop their own tools to be able to administer it. And Loop is a first-party app that's supposed to be paving the road, and that they've got a bit of catch-up to do. So,
yeah, the Loop mobile app I found a little glitchy,
Yep.
with it being in the test flight. I don't know about you. It's kind of like, oh, there's a few things to fix.
Yeah.
But we'll see how that comes. Jessica was asking about, adding it as a tab in Teams, and really, the moment it's a URL, you could
Yeah.
potentially drop it in, but you can't. It's that editing it is a whole nother matter. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, the loop components have to stay in OneDrive at the moment for them to be loopable. You can hack your way through and kind of make it work, but then it doesn't become an embedded experience.
Yeah.
And I have recently seen someone who has used, I guess, they've published the Loop app as a Teams app on the side, but really it's just an iframe through to the Loop web page. So okay, you're using it inside the Teams browser because it is just a browser. We know, MVPs know that there are some cool things coming that will actually close the story up, but it hasn't been as simple as turn the damn thing on and make it work. There's a whole lot of stuff they have to figure out to make sure it is a good experience. So I'm excited to see when that comes.
Yeah. Dr. Lawrence is asking about any analytics that come with Loop. My understanding is not at this point.
Yeah, actually, back to that discussion, Dr. Lawrence. It is sitting in SharePoint, but it's a SharePoint that no one can touch, taste, or see unless they've developed the tools to do so. And so it's on Loop to come up with the analytics of how people are using it. And like I know your background too, so like you'll definitely be looking at what can we discover and see in terms of the part that Loop plays in the collaboration personas, and how that might work in terms of adoption. So yeah, here, fingers crossed that that won't be too far off. It is still in preview, so a lot of things that do change and are up and down and working and shifting are because it is still in preview. When it comes into general availability, that's when we expect it to be shipshape for compliance and all those enterprise level things that we do want to be able to cope with, and hopefully that also means there'll be some tools to manage and see usage stats and analytics.
Yeah. Okay, thanks. But there's a couple of other in the chat. I'll let you
jump in the chat.
have a bit of a look at. What I'm going to do is jump over now, and we'll start on some of the updates, considering we've got quite a bit there. So I'm just going to move things just around a little. Okay. Thank you for that, Darrell. Great presentation. Good to bring something that can sometimes be complex down to some simple, clear and concise messages always really helps. I think anyone that sits across the ACM space, let alone, the technical, and there's a lot of people asking lots of questions. So the what's new in adoption, every month I say there was an awful lot. Today, it was not as much about the what's new, but a lot more about the what's coming. There is an awful lot that is in Messaging Center around some of the stuff that's actually coming down the line. A lot of the what's new I have covered off previously, so I didn't dive too much into some of that because it's already been done last month. So I really focused on the what's new. Don't forget, all our information does sit up on the YouTube channel. There are now 85 videos that I am involved in terms of collab talk alongside Christian and the team. We've just recorded another 21 questions, I think, so they'll all go live over the coming weeks, so answering questions for the community. And the release notes are already out there around Microsoft adoption. If you really want to know kind of what's happening across the adoption space, they do have the release notes that go up there. The latest champs call, there hasn't actually been sort of much that's gone out there, but keeping an eye out on what's going on across the community. There's the new community page that's actually gone live up on LinkedIn. You might want to actually join the community page. It will be there. There'll be lots of information flowing in with Caruana and Heather. It is focused a little bit more on the technical side than I suppose the end user, but something to keep an eye out on. There is a new Getting Started with Microsoft Viva series. There's plenty of information. It's been going for a little while. The latest one that's actually just gone up as a day in the life of the frontline worker and their manager. I would recommend going and having a look at that latest one in the Viva series. Some new custom backgrounds have come into play for Teams. So if you want the Pride 2023 backgrounds, there was also the Global Accessibility Awareness Day backgrounds that went up as well in the last month. If you wanted to go and have a look at some of those backgrounds, some of them are rather pretty, you might want to download and have them available. There is the Driving Adoption from Microsoft Viva book that's actually come out. It's 27 pages long, one I would really recommend having a look at. There's some really awesome content in there. One of those is the Microsoft Viva Adoption Project template. So it's actually got all the Viva components and what does it look like to roll out and the steps for a project. So I do particularly like that one, a much easier way for planning. Of course, you can then extend out on that and put in other components that you might need to, but it's a good starting point for the project template, something to go and download. Okay, so a new blog has just come out around the transforming employee engagement at Microsoft. So Microsoft have all these, inside track around them. I would recommend going and having a look at some of these. There are some really good sort of what's actually happening across Microsoft and how did they do it around the world. So if you haven't actually seen them, go and have a look. This one in particular is actually about Viva Engage and what was it that they were looking at trying to do and some of their key takeaways. So there's some good reading in there around how they've managed to push out Viva Engage with the, Yammer changeover. Okay. The blog for Microsoft, there's always something new going through. The main one at the moment is the Emergency Operations Center. It's now hit version number 2. So if you are looking at that within your business, then I would recommend going and having a look at as now V2 is out. In terms of the superheroes, what I've done is it's not so much I'm leaving this page here for the moment so that everyone can keep going and having a look. However, what I want to focus on is they've got the sway. There's a sway that they've just pushed out around their superhero tips and tricks, things that they actually recommend. There's a lot of links to videos that are actually in the sway, things that are sort of relevance. Go and have a look through it. I do particularly like it. So some good little hints and tips in there in the short videos. There is an AMA coming up for SharePoint, OneDrive lists and stream. So it's on June 14th at 10 a.m. PT time. So that's around about, I think, 2 a.m. Is that be right? I think something like that. Potentially, I always lose track of, what the time zone flip is. Something to add in if you want to go to the Ask Me Anything with the Microsoft team. If you didn't get engaged or involved in the M365 conference, there was some good content across OneDrive and SharePoint that I would actually recommend maybe going and having a look at. There's sort of plenty there for you to go and watch and dive into. These are kind of the main ones that I think will be of value. Now, some of this is actually in the blogs and a few things that we're going to be going through now anyway. So there's a bit of information there. If you didn't see the build news, I've focused on what's going on in the M365 space. So a lot of what we've talked about over the last month and then this month. So have a look maybe of some of the news pieces if you haven't seen the book of news. The inside track library. So I've just dropped in the that employee experience in the hybrid world was the sort of the latest one. I would say go in, have a look. This is all the inside Microsoft blogs of how they've done transforming the engagement. There's more than just that transforming the engagement. There are others in there as well. So it was just a screenshot of the other ones. underneath some of that, and often I will be walking through and I find something else. I've been doing this for so long, but I still find links that I go, oh, that's cool. There's so much hidden content sometimes across 365. One of them that I came across is they've actually got, in terms of the products, apps, and support, it's got a link to all the products across the suite that gives you the links to all of the learning. So you can come in on this particular link and it will have everything listed out with a link to all of the different sites and information. I do particularly like this one. This was a good one. Okay. In the admin center, moving forward, so this is coming from the end of June, the adoption score will actually be on by default. In the past, you often had to go in and start looking at turning it on, but it will now be fully enabled. So this means that when you go and visit this page, you can actually opt out. So there is a sort of button over here on the right. I should get my pen so we can draw all over these things. So when you come in, you can actually say whether it's going to be enabled or not. But in moving forward, I mean, it's good for some of us that are consultants that go in on the ACN side of things. Instead of having to constantly get it turned on, it will be on by default. So there's some support information there about that. So what's new to 365? So that's some of the adoption, but let's have a look at some of the what's new to 365. There's a blog that's come out around enhanced video inside 365. So there's quite a lot of content that's sort of in here, the various ways that they're surfacing video across 365, from, SharePoint through to, Teams and Engage, and you want to go and have a read through. Another one that's flown through is tips and tricks around search and how to actually use the different ways of searching. There is some changes that has come to search, and we'll have one more that's in this particular session of what's new. So if you want to see some of the different ways and the trips, this is a good one that you might want to put in. For example, maybe you've got a champs community, put it in as a tab for them to have a read. A new TEI has come out around Microsoft Teams. So this is the latest 2023 report. The last report, I think, was in 2021, so it was a little while ago. I recommend going in and actually having a look at some of the latest around the benefits of Teams. I often use a slide when I'm speaking in any training around Teams as to what are some of the benefits. So you can start to now see the latest impacts with some of the measurements around it. So one report I would highly recommend, especially in the ACM space, if you're trying to even put together a maybe a pitch deck around why they should take on Teams even, or you've got to do a business case around putting Teams out there, or some of the different features. So I would recommend it. The automatic lowering and raising of hands is now out. So that we've talked about sort of previously, but it is now, and it should be actually flowing in. So you should cross fingers start to see that lowering. The ultrasound howling detection. So this then means that if you're actually in a Teams meeting and you bring a device in, you know how you get that reverberation going on? What happens is the moment it starts, it's recognizing that it's already included in some of the audio, and it's going to then mute. So it's going to then mute one of the individuals. Let me move that down. There we go. It's all the way down. I'm covering it up. There you go. Drop back in again. So it's going to mute that microphone and the speaker of the individuals. Okay. The Notes tab, we've talked previously about the Notes tab coming into Teams. So now this is OneNote. If you click on, for example, Wiki, if it's still there and you click on the wiki, it will actually come up with that migration path. So it says you now want to migrate them over. It will drop it into the OneNote that's automatically generated for your team. So once that's sort of gone in, then your wiki will just become read only. Now, any new team or any new channel kind of moving forward will have the new Notes tab created as part of its standard channel moving forward. So that will be dropping in. The Pulse app is now available in your channel meetings. So there's lots of different polls. We've been talking about this quite a bit over the last sort of 6 months when it was starting to be talked about. So that's now available. There's a new experience coming around search when it comes to chat and channels. So the new chat search piece is in the right-hand rail. So in this whole over on the right-hand side over here, if you went Control F, or if you were on a Mac, Command F, then what it's going to do is actually going to come up with a search pane. So it actually has a full search pane over on the right-hand side. You'll see it now also in the channel, so not just in the chat. It will extend soon over into other conversations and ways to be able to work. Now, if you don't use Control F, then it is available as part of that information pane. So it's got that Find in the Channel button over on the right-hand side to be able to help individuals. So it will bring up then that information pane for searching. As part of those search results, you'll see it starting to flow through. It will have that, enhanced captioning where it will highlight. If you put in August, it will actually highlight so that you can discern where it is as part of the piece. Okay. The in-chat search also available as part of the pop-out. So if you do the pop-outs, it will actually be there when you do the pop-out too. So it doesn't have to just be in the main window frame. We now have some zooming controls while we're viewing in our share screen, which I do love. Often I would go, if it was just too small, I would actually go over to my mobile phone, even though it was a smaller screen. On the smaller screen, I could at least zoom in to be able to see some finer detail, especially when it came to some of the figures and things on a page. So do like that that's actually flowing through. You'll see it in the bottom left-hand corner with the restore to the original size. Setting your work hours and location, this all came out, back as part of the conference last year that was flowing through. They've been talking about it. You can now go in, set some of those preferences and where you're likely to work from as well. So there's some interesting information that's flowing through from Outlook on the web. So if you go to Outlook on the web, you'll be able to start setting some of this and flowing through into Teams. It will be coming in now right through till late August. There is a blog on Insiders. So if you go to the Insiders piece down here, that does list it out and a bit of step-by-step on how to set that up. So if you want to know how to, it is in there in the blog, and there's some other information that's flowing through. This is from back in October last year. Okay. Collaborative stage view. So now what's happening is it's actually allowing the users to be able to engage with some of the content. So for example, if you have a part or a piece come through, you'll be able to now pop that out so that you can open and continue to be able to see and deal with the chat. So you can look at both of these, side by side at the same time. So this is the collaborative stage view coming soon. Together mode usability improvements. So now in together mode, what you're going to have is the ability to be able to see, if someone is in spotlight or talking, plus the emojis if you're reacting to things as well. So whilst you're in that active view, that will now start to spotlight and pin and show things a little better in together mode. Now, the other thing is your own video in the gallery mode will be removed so that when you're in together mode, it avoids the duplication in terms of the view. So you don't have yours up the top. It will actually then drop down, helps you to be able to be focused. There's a webinar feature update. So 2 new features are that the content email can actually be edited by event organizers. Now, this is the reminders. So when we go to send out the reminders, now this is a Teams premium feature for both of them. And then the time to send the reminders can actually be configured as well. So it's not sort of ultimately set and locked in. You can say, how long beforehand. So these are 2 new features coming into the premium when it comes to webinars. One of the reasons I would highly recommend doing, Teams Premium is really around some of those webinars. If you do a lot of webinars, then that would be of real value to you. The changing to the live event attendee experience. So what's going to happen is if you have a guest in your tenant, so they're actually inside your tenant and they go to join on the web as a Teams live event attendee, then what's going to happen is they need to actually be logged in to your tenant. That will no longer support the guest just coming in on the web. They need to just, can't kind of come in as anonymous. They need to actually come in. So you'd need to advise any users that have that guest access, they've got to join the desktop or the mobile, not through the web and coming in as a bit more of an anonymous, because it will sort of start to recognize them in the Teams live event. The new lobby policy for a webinar. Now, this is actually there and available so that if you have a registration and they then go to join the webinar, it will only allow the registered user to bypass the lobby. So then that way you can make sure that those that are registered are actually joining. And then you've got a new reject the user so that they cannot come in and bypass the lobby. So it's a new feature that's actually coming into the meeting options for webinars. That way you can make sure that it's only those that are registered for the webinar are going to be able to join. This one, okay. So the sync button, when it comes to syncing in your Teams desktop client, it's actually going to, you can actually come in, sorry, the new sync button, it's available in the Teams desktop client, allowing that user to be able to sync between their controls and with Teams. So this allows for that coexistence scenario with other speech recognition apps and a few other things. So the one thing that happens is if you come in and you're joining with peripherals, so you've got the sync between your headsets, for example, and your Teams desktop, and then it allows them to be able to control the state between the two. So if you wanted to mute and things like that, you can actually disable the syncing so that it can stop, so you can have a multitude of devices if you want to use it for one on a phone and one on this or one on a device. And so it's actually this button to stop the syncing of the two. Now, if someone is having an issue with it, it could be because they've accidentally turned it on. So you might want to check the settings to make sure that they haven't actually toggled off the sync of the devices between the two. Okay. That was really important for accessibility reasons. Live translation captions. Now, we had our captions. The translation of the captions is a different thing. That is now becoming a licensed with Teams Premium starting from July 23. Okay, so your live captions actually don't change in terms of it being affected for the standard Teams. It's when it is the translated captions is a Teams Premium feature. So that will be moving over. There is the webinar usage report now, so that's actually flowing through in the Teams Admin Center. I do particularly like this because it will actually help us to understand sort of a little bit more around what's going on if you're involved in the reporting side. So that's actually flowing now into our reports. Okay, so you can view those. Breakout rooms are getting our participant shuffling. So finally, if you take them out of a room and you want to put them back in, you can do a auto shuffle type sort of scenario. And those that are unassigned that might come in later, you can then redistribute those existing. So if you've already got them preset and you've maybe got 5 and 5 and 5 in the other, and you end up with another 4 or 5 people, you can just go in just to go shuffle and reassign. So you don't have to worry about it. We'll do an auto piece for you. I do like that one. When it comes to our Teams room devices, one of the challenges we had in a room was things like breakout rooms and together mode. So that's now flowing into our Teams room device to be able to support breakout rooms now from the console itself and the together mode and adjusting it on the console. So I do like that one. New to SharePoint. A lot of what was on the new to SharePoint, we have gone through over the past. So I didn't want to dive into a lot of the stuff in terms of April because we had passed it through what was coming last over the last 2 months. However, there was a piece in there. I do love our Rebecca Jackson, who does an awful lot of wonderful stuff when it comes to inking. So a picture on the history of SharePoint is there. So if you are presenting anything around SharePoint, I do love that little picture that she's put together reminder of where we've actually come from. And, you know, when I'm looking back on it, it was around about, I would say around about here, that 2004, 2000 max, or where it was about 2004, I was really kind of getting in. It sort of made me realize, geez, that really is a journey. It wasn't quite there from the very beginning. Not that I remember anyway. I'm looking back on my career and going, did I, didn't I? I don't really remember too much until I started at Microsoft itself. So when it comes to the May roadmap, there's a few components that I'll go through in this one. So some of the build disclosures and 365 disclosures, I've already put them at the beginning. Now, in terms of the SharePoint and AI flowing through, there's lots of innovation that's coming in. We've seen and had some of the video pieces around Copilot previously. We've sort of chatted about some of it previously. However, I do like this particular blog because it's very focused on SharePoint and what it actually means with some little videos and components around how it's going to affect SharePoint. We saw some fabulous stuff that's coming down the line around SharePoint at our MVP conference, and I'm really excited and looking forward to some of the stuff actually hitting us that you'll eventually get to see. So you'll start to see some of that in the blog, and there's more coming. Okay. Now, Viva Topics app is available in Teams. Previously, you had to build it, like your tech team kind of had to put a script in to be able to load it. Now it's available as a built-in app to be able to just drop in. So it's a quick and easy for your end users if you want to have it pulling it in now. PDF annotation and interactive form fields for OneDrive. So it's easy for us to now be able to go edit in OneDrive on the web when it comes to PDF documents and be able to do those modifications automatically. So it will also help us around interacting with any form fields so that we can do simple editing directly from in OneDrive now on the web. You know, we're often having to open it on the desktop to be able to go through all of that and or open it into a Adobe online, for example. It's now embedded in the OneDrive to be able to edit and work with it. So that's signing in. You can do the sign with a PDF, so on your mobile phone. So if you've got your Android or you've got your iOS, so depending on what type of phone you've got, there's a blog that's been put out around how to sign a PDF on your phone. And it's quite an extensive step-by-step on how to do it with a ton of screenshots, a really good one to be able to put up for your end users. Maybe you have a news page you put out or a internal learning or help of how to be able to do that if you allow it on a mobile phone to be able to work with your 365 mobile app. Okay, it's a good one. What's coming to OneDrive? Now, the sync is going to relocate. Now, the sync button, we've had it on the command bar for a really, really long time. It is going to be moving up and underneath the settings gear. So that cog up in the top right, it is going to move. So if you've got training content, user content, a lot of kind of what I'm showing is there's all these shifts going on. So I would recommend, you might need to go and revisit some of the content that you've got on your SharePoint pages or inside PowerPoints or guides if you've got your own created guides, because this is moving. If you want to know where that sync button is, it is going to move. Another piece that's going to be a bit of work for us on our learning components that you might have created. There's a lot happening across the OneDrive when it comes to sharing and its look and feel. We've seen a lot around the look and feel of OneDrive and the restructure of the OneDrive look and feel, but the simplified sharing is coming into play. So it's got quite a revamp going on, and that's flowing through soon. If you have someone and you're sharing externally, what it's going to do the moment you choose an external person to share with, then a prompt is automatically going to come up to say that they actually are outside of your organization and do you want to continue. Otherwise, what's going to happen is if you can proceed to share, otherwise you'll get an error message coming up. Its link's not going to work. So if you cancel, it's going to say link's not going to work. Okay, so it's a simplified sharing experience. And as part of that revamp is a refresh of the manage access. Now, I've already seen some of this flowing through and having a look at it. There is sometimes a little bit of confusion when it comes to the clicking on the button and what it looks like. It might take a moment for your users to get used to the new look and feel. It is simplified, but they're going to need to sort of understand the new tabs and what it actually means when it comes to sort of people, groups, and links. The good part about it is it makes it that little bit easier for you to be able to adjust from edit, because it's got sort of bigger buttons, and trying to make it a little bit clearer around those direct access pieces, for example, and you can drill down into those links a little more now. Okay. OneDrive has a new piece flowing through. So with the known folder move, so as you start to sort of set it up, you can actually come in also at any point as part of the backup, you can toggle off whether they want to have the backing up of a particular folder. What's going to happen though is they are going to be able to restore the files back to their original location if they go turn it off, and it will then allow it to be able to go back. So a folder that contains the files that are stored only in the cloud though will not be moved. So they're going to remain in the cloud when they turn off. Okay, but it does put it back into the folder inside on their desktop. So the new OneDrive and that personalization, we did talk about it, we've looked at it, but the two that I do particularly like that's actually flowing in that I wanted to focus on is the people view. You know, that people view, we saw a lot of this, I suppose, in the past in Delve, the people view over in Delve when it came to files. This is, I suppose, a little bit more advanced. So when you do come over and down the bottom here, you choose people. This is what's actually going to come up. These are the people that you will have recently been working with, the files that you're working on, and it gives you who are kind of the top people. It's sort of sharing in who are your top contacts and what are the type of files and the names of them. I do like that one. The other one that I do like flowing in is the meetings button. So you'll be able to see based on, and I mean, also don't forget your OneDrive and the meetings button is very much about meetings that you've created from Outlook. So it sits across the personal space. Okay. The mobile loop component coming alive right through into Outlook. So you can now see the live preview of it in the thread directly on your phone in Outlook. You'll be able to click to edit it, and it's going to open it up over either, depending on whether you got the Loop app or the Office mobile app. So one or the other. Otherwise, it's just going to be a view. You're not going to be able to edit if you don't turn on either of those apps. I know that sometimes a lot of Gov don't turn them on, for example. So you may or may not be able to edit it, but it's now flowing through as a loop component. Task management experience across Loop. So I know that Darrell's touched on this one. It's gone out in a blog. Go and have a look at it. It lists out all the different ways that you're going to be able to create your task lists. Okay, so that's Teams, Chat, and Outlook, and where are all those Loop components. So one to go and have a read of. Loop components across Teams. Now, you'll be able to sort of go in. There is a video that's just come out literally only 4 days ago now around how to use those loop components in Teams. It's been put out by the Microsoft 365 team in terms of the time savers around loop. So they've got a time savers series. So I recommend maybe going and having a watch of that if you want to watch it off the back of Darrell's presentation. Viva Insights is now going to have a recurring meeting audit report flowing in so that you can actually see some of those metrics around, what are the really big, expensive meetings, so you can see what's sort of having those impacts. You can look at the costs and identify the trends and the different patterns and any multitasking and other, prevalence flowing through. So it's actually got a full report, and it's even going to give you a bit of a cost around it as part of those insights. Another piece is the update to the organizational insights. Eligible managers are actually going to be able to see subgroups within their organization and giving them some controls to be able to highlight important interactions that are going on as part of the Viva Insights piece. There's also going to be some customizable metrics for our meeting queries so that you can do some predefined attendee meeting hours, for example, so you can go do some custom metrics. There is a link there on what other custom metrics you can actually do for Viva Insights. If you're not familiar with it, I would recommend, if you do have the Viva Insights and the paid insights, to go in and have a look as to what you can customize. There's also a new data import feature so that you can import data from other organizational sources and data from Workday should you use Workday. So that's in private preview at the moment. So some of this is coming out part sort of through June. Some of it is in private preview. You can join up though. Viva Engage has the ability now to do a bulk community member import. It is available now to add up to 20,000 community members. It will take a good 24 hours for it to process though. You do have to be in native mode to be able to support this functionality. There is some step-by-step instructions if you want to know how to, including the CSV file, so that you've got the template to be able to work with. So nice to be able to see that for the larger organizations, being able to push that through. There is the, in terms of the Viva, it's got a campaign hub so that you can come in, you'll be able to search for your campaigns and look at executive sponsorship for campaigns. So this new discovery hub that's flowing in allows you to be able to see things like, you know, what are the top campaigns, and be able to browse sort of featuring campaigns and having them flow in. A user can then follow those active campaigns and learn a little bit more sort of on a landing page. So that's now flowing through. And it's going to be using the Viva Engage search bar as well. So that's a nice one coming through on the homepage and then surfacing Viva campaigns. Answers over in Viva. Now, there was a webinar that the Viva Engage team did only last week. If you're in the Yammer customer group, you'll be able to see it. They've actually put the recording in there already. It is not available yet on the Viva adoption page. There is a webinars link on the adoption page for Viva. It will go up there hopefully fairly soon, so you'll be able to see it. I couldn't put the link there just yet, but I would recommend having a look at the Viva webinar if you're in the customer center, Yammer group. I think it's still it's gone over to the Viva Engage group. I think now. I think they've deprecated and it's now there. If you're not part of it, then it's one to potentially get involved in. It's an Australian. Oh no, it's a global one, isn't it, Darrell? I think it's global, the customer one, if I remember rightly. It's not just originally we had an ANZ one. Yeah, I thought so. I know we did one have originally that was ANZ, and then I think they've made it global. So Answers Focus View in Viva Engage. So now it's going to be rolling out where if you've got limited community, so say if you've got 2 or less, it actually helps to focus on the Viva Engage experience when it comes to answers. So it kind of, if you don't really want Viva Engage, but you want to focus on answers, you can actually do that. But that is only for licensed Viva Suite customers, and you do need to be in Yammer mode for that. Okay. There is also now administrators are going to see an information panel appear in the right column over, so on the right-hand side, so on the right kind of rail, an answers tab that allows them to be able to work a little bit more and be able to adjust sort of content. So they will have an information panel for the admins. Viva Engage, the iOS and Android apps, it's had its navigation updates. So there's going to be a little bit quicker and easier to be able to work on things like having that inbox and notification shortcut. They're going to now be up in the top right in terms of the navigation. They're moving from the top right and they'll be coming down to the bottom navigation bar down here. So they're all going to be moving around a little bit. So you'll see different things moving from the top right down to the bottom. Okay. The other shortcuts are going to remain the same. There is, instructions on how to access. A lot of times you get it and it's new. It will give you a direction through. It's going to update, so there's no additional actions you need to do about that one when it comes to mobile. Viva Connections is changing its layout in terms of the desktop experience. It's going to have a vertical feed moving through. So it's got this sort of column experience sort of flowing in to be able to help you. And then down below, you're going to have some of those company resources sort of flowing through in the company feed. So it's a bit of an update to the layout of Viva Connections. The news notifications, it's going to be having mobile push notifications through for your SharePoint news on Viva Connections, because Viva Connections is about kind of collating all the things that are going on across the business if you're not familiar with Viva Connections. So those notifications are now going to come through a little better. So those publications of, news on their SharePoint site, if someone comments or likes a post, for example, or there's @mentions. So those notifications are now going to flow in through. Okay. There's some dashboard customizations that you can do when it comes to the mobile phone. So when a user gets onto the mobile phone, you can kind of say what that looks like. The user can reorder, so they can customize it themselves, but you can turn on or off, some of these features as to, can they rearrange or hide things like the dashboard. So as an administrator, you can disable it if you want to, because they can customize it now for the mobile. Multi-account support when it comes to Microsoft To Do on an iOS. Okay, so that's actually flowing through. You'll be able to see data from one account at a time. You have to switch between the accounts so it's not all kind of joined together on your iOS. Now, this one I don't know if I'm going to love or hate. If you're anything like me and you've got an Apple Watch, so you get your Apple Watch going, your to-do notifications you're going to be able to do directly from your Apple Watch in the settings, and it will do the reminder notifications and things like that as well. So kicking it directly off from your phone, your watch. So cool. Another place. Okay. Whiteboard has got a few new features flowing through. So a couple of them are, so this is one, I've got a couple of other pages to go. It's got a visual refresh going on in terms of the whiteboard. The interface, whether it's, on your tablets or your desktops, for example, it's going to have some key content creation tools. So you can start to see there's a bit of an adjusting of its look and feel. The notes and the reactions, for example, comments, text, shapes, all of them are going to be repositioned a little bit more on the toolbar. So you're going to be able to see down the bottom here. It's just had a bit of a, the icons and a few other things have had a bit of a refresh, so it's a little bit more funky and modern. So that's all flowing through on the app interface when you're over in Teams and meetings. The ink color picker on Whiteboard, it's got a wider range for inking. We had fairly set colors. Now you've even got a slider so that you can say what's the opacity level on it. Not only that, but it will also remember your recent colors too. And you've got your hex, so you can actually put in your own corporate colors and go, I want to do on my whiteboard our color green, like, with my guys. So that's flowing through. I was like, oh, cool. I did like that one. Okay. The handwriting beautification and ink straightening flowing through when it comes to Teams, when it comes to Surface Hub, as well as the app and our meeting room devices, so the MTR experience. So annotation now, when it comes to Whiteboard, you'll be able to select it and say, make it a little bit more eligible, clean it up just that little bit, straighten it if it's on an angle, if you've written it on an angle. So, fix it up so it's straight. It's cool. Okay. I know my writing's dreadful. Especially when I'm writing and, across, I always end up on an angle. I cannot for the life of me keep it straight. Even when I sometimes put lines on a page, I don't know what it is. I like to go on an angle. Text predictions, OneNote on Windows. We've seen this. It's in the likes of, you've got it now in Word, for example. It's now flowing into OneNote. So the text prediction, when you start to actually do writing, it will come up with, the word, and you can then just come in, press your tab or your right arrow, and it will drop it in. Or you can keep on just ignoring it. It is on by default. So if you wanted to go in and turn it off, you could. Okay, so it's up to you whether you do want it on or not. I personally like it. Generally, it's pretty good. Outlook, when it comes to Windows and the web, the reading pane that you actually get, you can customize a background display image in the reading pane whenever the email is not selected. Okay, so this is when it's not selected. It can have just a a nice picture over on the right-hand side. It can be turned off or on by the user if they wanted to. So that's when you're not clicked on the reading pane. Okay, so your message list selection, it's having a UI update for both online as well as the desktop. So you've got your message list kind of little selection circles on the left-hand side of each row. Now, to work with that, it's adjusting around a little bit in the way that it's going to come up and the things that you're going to do. Users are going to have to get themselves a little familiar with some of the adjustments that are going on. Your multi-selection of holding the shift key will continue to work, but the way that it's actually coming in, that select mode that you get before the checkboxes appear is going to adjust and move to the top right-hand corner of the message list. Okay, so it's just moving around a little. The browser updates. Okay, so if you are coming in and you're looking at working in Outlook on the web, and you're trying to do it from an unsupported and or legacy browser, it's going to redirect you to a light version of Outlook. It'll only give you the basic functionality. If you're not familiar with the type of browsers, there's a couple of ones there that I kind of go, geez, I've never heard of those browsers. It was some of the interesting ones that were in there, but they're not going to actually be supported, or really, really old ones and a few other things like that. So what does it look like for that light version of Outlook? The Teams personal tab in Outlook when it comes to iOS. So there's going to be a bit of a change in terms of the tab. There's going to be the More button in the tab bar. So the More button is going to change to the Apps button in the tab bar. So if you look on your mobile phone down the bottom, it's actually got More in the bottom right. It's going to be renamed to Apps. So if you're looking for things, you can come in there and you'll find Teams available there as well. Excel. There was a few things that came through with Excel that I particularly liked. One of them was the table context menu. They put now, so that you know what it is, FIA is feedback in action. So this means when you're providing feedback, what are they doing to act on it? So that's a new feature that's kind of just come up on the page, which I thought, oh, that's interesting. So now the first feature that I particularly liked was the add option for the share table in terms of context. This allows us in Excel to be able to come in and, as part of that right click, start to have a look at some of the other components that you can put in. And this is sending a link to just the table. Okay, so just this inside the sheet, inside that sheet, just the link to the table. Okay, inside Excel for the web. So this is the web version. The other one is for Windows and Mac, the check your formula value with the preview tooltip. So you can walk your way through and just double check it and make sure if it's actually working. And it will show you what you're pointing at. Coming to Word, the content edits has had a bit of a change when it comes to the flyout. The flyout has adjusted. So it used to look a little different. I didn't put in what it looked like. I've just put in what it's going to look like now. So that flyout is located in the top right-hand corner in Word Online. It's also known as that collaboration corner. So now what you're going to see first is you're going to see first up now the activities for you, and then you're going to see the changes in the document. So that's going to flow in as part of that flyout. Designer is now free and it's in public preview. Before you had to kind of sign up and you were lucky if you got in. It's now out there. If you want to go and have a look and play around with Designer, you can. So liking that. I've been playing around with that for a little while, but it's good to see it now in private preview. Stream. You have a playlist view now in the SharePoint as a web part. So you can actually drop it into a page. So you'll be able to have then your user can select that playlist and put it in and show it in a full-blown playlist alongside with the video playback over on the right-hand side. So it's good to see that playlist flowing through. We saw playlists coming in as a list inside Teams, for example. So when you do your Teams list, you could see, the playlist. So seeing it now flowing through into a web part, cool, like it. the retiring piece. I put it straight after that one because the Streams Classic web part is retiring. Of course, the old, Stream Classic is retired. So we're looking then at what does it look like when the web part. Now, you're no longer going to be able to use it after August. So you're not going to be able to drop it in after August. However, there is the new web part that's come into play that you can use it. If you are using the old classic web part on your SharePoint site, you can still use it to play videos until February 2025. You still got a while. Hopefully, by then, most videos by then are usually defunct anyway. Things are always changing. Nearly done. Okay, so what's also retiring? The edit and reply is disabled now in the file previewer. So if you are sending it through and you've got that edit and reply button, it is being disabled. Okay, so users will still be able to edit the files using the web or desktop app and then attach it back as a copy. But the thing is, they're going to have to download, save, edit, and then send it back. Okay, so it's going to be disabled. Yes, I do provide a recording for the session. Don't forget to go in and have a look at the release notes. They're out there. This is the one way that I do keep an eye out on what's actually happening. In events, the Digital Workplace Conference is coming up. I will be presenting in August here in Australia. Not sure, Darrell, are you coming to Australia for the conference?
I wasn't going to launch or talk about it officially, but yeah, over the weekend I got the nudge. So I'm on the list now.
Yay, we'll see you there. Okay. Catch up on the Viva Summit recordings are still there, Community Day events, and some of the upcoming events that are around the world. So you can always have a look on the community days as to what they are. Okay. All the usual, where do you find in terms of some of the adoption support, the newsletters that are out there. I have dropped in the extra adoption link now around that Inside Track library, which I think was of value to be able to help and support you. Always lots of great information on where do you find some of the user groups that are around ANZ to be able to support you, and our links for previous sessions. So I'll make sure that that's all available for you. What's next? We are back on the 4th of July. So, at 12 o'clock. We will see you again then. I'll have to have a look and see if there are any questions. I know you've been having a very busy chat in there, Darrell, with lots of awesome questions going on. Lots of really good content I missed because there was lots of chatter. I missed if there's any questions on the content I've been presenting. You've been across it, Darrell. Do I have anything there?
Yeah, I was answering a bit here and there. No, not too many questions.
Yeah. Very good. Okay, let me get having a look through. If anyone's got any questions, please feel free to raise your hand. I'm more than happy to answer anything that you might have. Okay. If not, yet again, we have had our another session hitting June 2023. I will take the recording and put it up on YouTube, on the YouTube channel. You can look it up on YouTube. It's just at Microsoft 365 Adoption if you want to have a look. That will go up over the next couple of weeks. I'll also put a link in the chat so that you can come back to it. So if you're still part of this particular chat, I'll drop it in. I put it into our comments on Meetup. It goes up on Twitter. It also goes up on LinkedIn. So if you're following me across any one of those spaces, you'll see when I push it live. So that will be provided for you and pushed out. So you won't be able to access the link to the recording inside this particular team. Once it's done, I will tell you when it is available. Thank you so much, Darrell, for coming along again to the session.
You're welcome.
Hopefully you've enjoyed. And, sometimes I kind of go, have I correctly pitched that the right way? Because sometimes it's hard unless you spend a bit of time playing around with content. It's always a difficult one.
Well, sometimes we just got to slow down and sort of think about how to explain this thing. And while Microsoft put months of work into the way they talk about different products, it pays to put it in your own words because you know your people.
Yeah, that's it. And it's a tough one. And I mean, this month, I think we got quite a bit of content that we need to update as ACM specialists. If you're inside an organization, each month it's getting harder and harder to keep up to date with some of the content that's actually out there. Make sure you've got a good change process internally when it comes to the message center and ensuring that you're able to keep your end users up to date on some of this news as well, because things are going to confuse them. There's a few ones that are going to be a bit trippy and tricky out there. No. Thank you, everyone. It's wonderful to see you all. Until next month, when I come back in and spend 30 hours building out the presentation again for you. Awesome. Thank you.
You got to give yourself
everyone.
a raise, Kirsty.
I know, right? Exactly. It's it's a raise of nothing to nothing. Woo! The joys of it all. Okay, righto. Thank you all. Thank you so much, Darrell. Appreciate you being here. And I'll turn off the recording now. If anyone does have any questions or anything, I'm more than happy to answer them offline if you prefer.
Bye now.